So, futurism, what it means, Professor Pasik, please.
Well, we call this field futures studies, which means there are infinite futures. And what we are trying to do is to analyze those possibilities of the future. And the main idea of futures studies is not to understand or try to figure out what will happen tomorrow. Who are we to understand the future? We are still a very primitive species. The whole idea of futures thinking is to understand the trends, to study the possibilities, to study the negative and positive outcomes of our actions in the present, in order to come back to the present and change whatever we can change. This is the whole idea. Now, futures thinking is, generally speaking, a branch of a different academic field, which is called systems analysis or systems thinking. We are trying to understand how systems are evolving. And the idea is, when you understand how systems are evolving, you have more tools to impact those systems. So generally speaking, we are trying to figure out how systems are evolving from a very, let's say, a very important assumption. Our assumption is that there is logic how systems are evolving. No, not all the academic, the scientific fields will agree to that assumption, but we tend to say that if there is a logic how systems are evolving, let's figure out that logic. And now it's very hard to understand how the logic, for example, how come a human being, when he's born in a body of, let's say, 50 centimeters. Okay, and every year he tends to add a new 5 centimeters, and then at a certain age he tends to add another 7, and then he stops. We don't understand exactly the logic how a physical system develops, but what we are trying to understand is maybe the patterns of how systems are evolving. And when we stumble upon a pattern or a logic, we just tend to give it a reliability. And with that kind of understanding how systems are evolving, we are trying to figure out the trajectory of that system. And this is what we call nowadays futures thinking. Now, generally speaking, in the last century or so, since this discipline has been developing, about 70% of the predictions that a lot of people have done in different fields, from future technologies and future conflicts and future economies, about 70% has been realized, which means at this point in our evolution as a species, we are at a stage in which we can say with some certainty of about 70% that we understand how systems are evolving. And that's enough for us. We are not prophets. We are not trying to understand 100% what will happen tomorrow or 10 years from now, etc. But the idea is to figure out the trajectory in order, again, to come back to the present and try to see what can we change in order either to strengthen positive trends or avoid negative trends. And this is actually the whole philosophy in 2-3 minutes.
Well, it is not easy to catch it, when, again, people have these issues and imagination, but I think it is a very important, and especially nowadays, it's a very important field. And as you said, there is a kind of research, right? And how you think this subject or this issue and the research of it reflects in the field of education?
Well, I am aware of hundreds of methodologies with which we are trying to figure out the trends. Some some methodologies are more mathematical methodologies and statistical methodologies, and others are not, are more qualitative kind of methodologies and quantitative kind of methodologies. Education is a very important human endeavor. This is a tool that humanity has developed in the last 150 years only. Before that, it was sporadic. It was done, by personalities that did not have any education to how to exactly educate. We didn't have any pedagogical kind of understanding of theories. So education has become probably the most important tool for humanity to direct and manage its future. And we are trying to understand what's the best way for humanity to direct its future. So we have even been developing methodologies specifically in the field of education, with which we are trying to figure out, for example, two main issues. One is what kind of knowledge we need to provide our kids and our next generation in order for them to be able to put on their shoulders humanity in the next 20, 30 years. That's what we call the core curriculum that we need to devise, to analyze, to clarify, in order not to waste our energies in a knowledge base that is not relevant to the next generation. This is one issue that is being researched all over the world now. The other issue is what are the cognitive skills that we need to develop with our next generation in order for them to better manage humanity when they will have their responsibility to take over humanity, probably 20, 30 years from now. So these are just two ideas that people that are working on future education are putting a lot of efforts to understand. And we are at the stage now that it's not so clear exactly what's the knowledge base that we have to deliver to our kids. A lot of people are pushing and stretching to their direction, but there is no consensus at this point in time about exactly what should be the core curriculum that we need to give our kids from preschool to even academic and university education or higher education. Take, for example, what should the university teach students in physics? Physics theories are constantly changing. Our knowledge is constantly dynamic. So what do you give exactly those students in 3 or 4 years of their undergraduate studies? And there is a lot of differences between universities, between nations, exactly what to deliver in physics, in chemistry, in psychology, whatever. And we are at a stage in our evolution in which we are totally confused because of two main reasons. First of all, humanity is producing knowledge in a rate that has never been done in history. We are at a stage in which about every 18 months, we are doubling our knowledge almost in all human endeavors, human fields. By the way, in the field that is constantly changing, the knowledge in the field is constantly changing more than physics is history. So we are knowing every day more about our past than, and it's changing the way we understand who we are.
That's right.
So how do you organize that knowledge and provide that knowledge to our next generation? So we are very confused, and that's the reason there are a lot of approaches and attitudes to what kind of knowledge we should deliver, what kind of skills we should deliver. Most of us are delivering to our next generation a set of skills that we think is relevant today for them. But most probably when they will be 10, 20 years from now, when they will be taking responsibility of our societies, they will need a very different set of skills. So this is just an example of the domain of studies that the futurists in the field of education are trying to come up with. I did also some kind of studies, and I've published some books and some papers about this. If you want, we can a little bit elaborate, but
Yeah,
this is...
actually, it is connected to my next
Okay,
question. You
what's your
know, it
next
is like,
question?
it is okay. You've been walking this path, okay, since I believe in some moment of your life you decided to get and to jump into it. But when was the first moment that you started to begin wondering if there is a different way we should be thinking about education because of that field, or of the specific field?
Well, I think that the first time I realized that something is not relevant to our next generation was uh, was when I started doing my master's degree. Suddenly, I realized that, and I was acquainted with a personality that somehow in my education nobody mentioned him. His name was Flynn. He's a professor in New Zealand, and he has discovered that in the last in the second half of the 20th century, uh, generally speaking, IQ worldwide has augmented by 17%, which means in a matter of about 50 years, our kids have become much more smarter than us, 17%. This is a phenomena that, as far as I know, has never happened in human evolution. And suddenly I realized that our kids are much smarter than us. And we are still teaching them things that we think are better for them, but they are far away already than we can even imagine. Whoever has, grandchildren, for example, can realize it immediately. They catch, they understand, they can, access knowledge in ways that is very bizarre for most of us. So I suddenly realized that something in evolution is in the making, and it's not being reflected in our educational system. So I started, studying the issue. Where is it coming from? Is it continuing that evolution? What does it mean to our kids? What should we do in order to really be relevant to that evolutionary kind of process? And it's continuing in a very fast fate. We have, Flynn has found that every year IQ is being augmenting in a rate of about 0.3%, which means that in a matter of 10 years, IQ is augmenting by 3%, which means a person that is 100 points in IQ, in a matter of 20 years is 160 or 70 points, which makes a very great difference. It's a different person, a totally different person. And he perceives reality in a very different way. He has a very different ability to access, organize, understand information. And we are not reflecting that evolution in our educational system. So this is how it started with me. What I've been doing in the last 30 years is trying to take control on that evolutionary process. And I've asking myself, what exactly was the reason that humanity is going through that evolution? And I found that with some technologies, I can further, push the envelope of humanity. And what I've been doing is developing technologies and interfaces in order to take kids and in a matter of 3 months, add 5 or 10 points in their IQ abilities, not wait 50 years for the evolution to take action, and see if I can, continue pushing the envelope further for humanity, and let them, apply it in their daily activity, in their daily life. I will not be able to see how exactly they can apply it, but they will do it as we have done it for millennia. Humanity has been constantly developing, and we have been constantly coming up with new ideas that constantly have been developing and pushing forwards humanity in economies, in technologies, in sciences. And just think if a person a couple hundred years only earlier could have come to 2021, he will be totally shocked. He will not understand what's happening. He will probably think that we are doing magic now with Zoom. But it's a very simple technology with which we are converging from all over the world in a digital way that delivers information and knowledge in manners that we could not do before that. So things are very important, very significant developments are in the making, and we are not exactly reflecting that trend in our pedagogy, in our knowledge base that we are delivering, in our skills we are developing for our kids. And I hope they'll be able to do it by themselves. I really hope. I know that some of them will do it by themselves, but it's only some of them. It's only maybe 10, 20, 30% of them. What about the other 70%? We need to scaffold their development in our educational system. And I'm afraid that we are not doing it as we should.
I would like to just to bring you back to what you started to say about the books you wrote or you research about education specifically. But I will add to that another thing is that people, and I think it is very right to ask it here in the chat, they are saying, okay, what about the EQ, the emotional intelligence? And what about, and I'm adding about the spiritual intelligence.
Okay, well.
So it is becoming a huge issue, but please.
Well, we are probably developing in all those kind of let's say, dimensions of our entity. Just take, for example, that humanity now is much more moral than it used to be just 50, 70 years ago. Take, for example, World War II, how immoral we were. Nowadays, we are developing global institutes to bring that morality into our bilateral and multilateral exchanges. So we are much more developed. We don't see it since we are part of that development. We are still immersed within that development. But about a century from now, or a couple centuries from now, when somebody will study how humanity has developed, he or she will see that the 20th century was an amazing, a very cruel century. And then the 21st century, humanity has done a leap of faith in its cognitive abilities, in its spiritual abilities, in its emotional abilities, in its state of mind of understanding the other. We are not perfect. It will take another millennia to reach what some of us would like to have already now. But as a species, we are really emerging to be much more, much more smarter, much more spiritual, much more knowledgeable, much more aware of the others. But it's a very long road. It's not. It took us millennia to come to this stage, but we have done an amazing leap of faith in specific. Just take for example how in a matter of about 200 years only, for example, life expectancy 200 years ago was on average about 25 years. Now we are 80 years on average worldwide. Okay, and we are just at the very beginning. Now there is a correlation between life expectancy and morality, because the more you are elder, the more you are at ease, the more you understand the other, the more you are patient about the other. So if we will continue to raise our life expectancy, just another 40 years in the next, let's say, century, we are going to have a very different species. That species will be 100 and 120 years on average, and it will bring a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, a lot of spiritual and moral issues into the table, and it will be a totally very different species, and it's going to happen in the next century.
Mhm. Actually, if we go to up to there, so we are here from, we have presence of people from different countries all over the world, mainly from developing countries. And I would like you to maybe emphasize the if and the how we can create the desired educational future tailored made to each culture and population. Is there a way to do it?
Well, what I have found in my studies is that there is a, a correlation between uh, cognitive skills and cultural connotations. Cognitive skills are not a sterilized kind of human skill. It brings a lot of cultural, regional, let's say even religious kind of thinking into the forefront. So each country, each group, each subgroup would be able to develop new skills that are very unique to them. Now, the 20th century has emphasized the standardization of skills, of economies, of knowledge. Everything has been done with standards, okay? And we have developed a lot of standards and a lot of um, um, let's say, tools to compare nations. I believe that in the 21st century, we are going to evolve to a higher level of understanding that those standards are not helping us, are actually holding us into a fixed frame or framework. Now, if we will break those standards, then we will have each group, each person, each nation come up with new kinds of ideas, new kinds of standards, new kinds of connotations, and we will be able to emerge much better than with the standardization that we have been trying to do in the last at least half a century. So the OECD, all those standards are just a stage in our evolution. We were trying to bring everybody to the same standard, but now we are going to a different state of mind that says that, okay, we brought everybody to understand that there is a standard. Now, okay, let's put aside those standards and let everybody bring their personal, their local, and their cultural connotations and pros and the uniqueness into the table, and we will compete how unique we are, not how the same we are. And that will make education very different in the 21st century than in the 20th century.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah, it's very important, especially, with this nowadays, as there is a participant here that she's telling us that it is not so easily, because sometimes actually you in this out in these days everything is so fast, so running. We jump from one thing to the other, and I think that is a very important subject what you just mentioned. And what do you think? What are the desired profiles of the future learner and the future teacher? I have a problem with the word teacher nowadays. I think we have to change it. That is my point of view, to another dimension, maybe, a mentor or a guide. But let's leave it there for
So
to
what's the
be
question?
to
Can you
be the
repeat it?
standardized issues. But what do you think are the desired profiles? Yes,
The profile of what? Of what?
of the future learner and the
Oh,
future
okay.
teacher.
Okay. Well, I prefer not to use the term future students or future learner. I prefer to
Okay,
say future human.
okay,
The
that's much
future
better.
human, uh, I believe, is going to be a different species. Okay. Let me sum up a very interesting theory that explains what makes us as a species very unique in the evolution of this planet. We are probably the only species that when we know something, we know that we know something. Okay? So this is the epistemology in a nutshell. Epistemology is the endeavor to understand how humanity perceives its surrounding or the world, etc. And what I have just said can be summarized in three letters: KKK, which means when we know something, we know that we know. And this is what made this is the basis of sciences. What we are trying to do in science is to make sure that what we know is correct, which means in science we call it reliability. Okay, so we have developed so fast in the last couple centuries because of this trait. When we know that we know. However, we are past that stage in our evolution. We have now technologies with which we can add another K to our perception. Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, for example, let's say I have my an iWatch in my wrist. Now this little gadget constantly uh, collects data and information about myself. How many hours I sleep, how many steps I do, etc., etc. That knowledge is being collected and being, put on a server somewhere in the world. Now, in a matter of, let's say, a decade, I will have another layer of knowledge of who I am, because up to now, I did not exactly understand how my sleep is having effect on how I think. But after 10 years of data being collected about me, I will have another layer who I am. I will know better how my physical entity is being developing. What are the negative, let's say, habits I have? What are the positive habits I have? So I have another layer that will add some knowledge about who I am exactly. And this is just one example. We are now putting a lot of sensors all around us. And those sensors are collecting data, collecting data. We are still at the very early age of analyzing that data and pushing that data back to our perception about the world, about ourselves, etc., etc. So humanity in about 10, 20 years, and in 10, 20 years are our graduates from our schooling system. They will have a perception about themselves totally different than you and me have a perception about ourselves. And it will be a very different human cognition. And with that cognition, they will be able to generate ideas that you and me at this point can't even imagine that humanity can generate. And they will push forwards humanity to directions we cannot even imagine at this point. So I'm trying to give you a very large perspective of what's happening, and it's already in the making. It's not a futuristic thing. We are at a very early age of that development. But whoever has contact with kids already knows that something unusual is in the making. They are much smarter than us. They are much healthier than us. They are much, let's say, aware of what's happening around them than just one or two generations earlier. And they will bring that ability 20 years, 30 years from now into whatever they are going to be a part of, either in developing new technologies or organizing societies, economies in about 30 years from now. They will be the decision makers of humanity 30 years from now. And they will have different ideas how to develop, how to organize humanity than we have now. I'll give you just an example that will give you a sense of what I'm speaking about. Just think about how cryptocurrency is going to change humanity, totally change humanity. Now, that cryptocurrency idea could not have been imagined 20 years ago. But somebody, by the way, we don't know still who that body is now, somebody about 10 years ago came up with an idea that was so far reaching, but it is in the making and it's going to change all our institutions 20 years from now. So, in a matter of 30 years, things are going to be totally different, and nobody could have imagined how different it's going to be about 10 years ago. And this is just
Yeah.
an example how an idea that is being developed or generated in the mind of one person that probably was, much more developed than others, and it's going to push forwards humanity in a very fast way. Think about Einstein, think about Galileo Galilei, but those people came apart from each other century or couple centuries. Now we are going to have every 3 5 years somebody that will come up with new idea that will change totally our paradigms of economies, societies, um, international morality in a very fast way. And those kids are in our educational systems at the moment. And I don't think we are really nurturing their mind to be able to do it at this stage. Because what we are trying to give them at this stage is what we think now is the best way of thinking, the best knowledge that they need to have. But it's going to be very different. So I believe some of them will be able to make it by themselves. The issue is how can we bring the other 70% to realize their potential? Those 20-30% of humanity will do it, and they will push forward humanity in a very fast way. But the other 70% need to catch up. Even to catch up, they need some guidance.
That's right.
And how do we guide them now in the educational system? It's a very challenging issue. So, I myself did some studies to figure out what are the future um, cognitive skills that are going to be needed in order to survive in such an environment and society. And I have developed a taxonomy of those skills. And it's been now studied in different places worldwide.
Will you
We have
like to
also,
share with us a little bit of them, please?
well, what I've done is a very simple exercise. I believe everybody here knows and is familiar with the Bloom taxonomy. Bloom in the 50s have developed a set of cognitive skills that he believed needed to be delivered in our schooling. Okay, from knowledge and analysis, and there are 6 categories of cognitive skills. And in the last half a century, that's what we have been doing in our educational systems. What I found is that there is another layer to each of those skills that we are not delivering in our schooling system now. So I have, if you wish, added another tier to each of those 6 categories. And I have defined those skills. I have developed even tools to measure those new layers of those 6 skills of Bloom that Bloom has defined. What I have done also, I have defined a new skill, a totally new skill that we are not teaching in our educational systems, from the preschooling to higher education. And I called that skill the Amelioration skill. Uh, and we have developed procedures to teach that skill and to measure that skill. Basically, the idea of amelioration is that you take pieces of knowledge from different disciplines and you combine them together in a very subjective way. And you come up with a ameliorated idea. Okay? And we are not teaching that skill. We are teaching how to analyze things, how to let's say know things in different levels, but we are not teaching how to ameliorate knowledge. And there's no, this is not exactly the forum to elaborate, but I have papers, I have books about it, and
Mhm.
everybody can go to my website and download those papers and see exactly how different that skill from other skills, how different that skill from generally speaking creativity. It's not creativity, it's something else that can be taught, that a pedagogy of it can be developed and can be delivered to different levels in our educational systems. What I believe is that in a matter of 10, 20 years, most of our graduates will have to show that they are skilled in that skill. Either they will be aware of it or not. This is what the future is going to demand from our graduates. Since in 10, 20 years, our knowledge will double itself every 3 weeks. Every
Wow.
3 weeks, humanity will double its knowledge in all human endeavors. So knowledge by itself it will become a commodity. Knowledge that won't have any significance. If you won't have knowledge, you will be totally out of the game. But what do you do with knowledge? How do bring personal connotations, cultural, let's say, tendencies and religious aspects to how you mix different kinds of knowledge, of information to make it unique and contribute that uniqueness to humanity. That's what most of us will have to show, we will have to demonstrate in 10, 20, 30 years. And our kids are not being trained to do that kind of thinking. And I have been
Maybe
developing,
the
but
problem is the teachers, not only the kids.
well, that's another
They should
issue.
be
That's another
they should
issue.
be trained for.
That's another issue. But I believe that our kids need to take some responsibility in their educational training. Nowadays, for example, it's already 30 years we have developed a model in which about 70% of the knowledge base is being delivered by the educational system, and about 30% the kids themselves need to decide what they want to learn, how they want to be tested, etc., etc. By the way, in Israel, this very week, the Ministry of Education has come up with an idea, and I'm glad to say that I was part of pushing that idea, that because of this COVID crisis, then the Ministry of Education has said that from now on, teachers need to deliver 60% of the knowledge base that these kids need to know, and about 30% is being delivered, the responsibility has been delivered to teachers, to the school board, if you wish, and also to the kids. So from now on, 40% of the knowledge base that each one is going to be tested on is going to be a personal knowledge base that is very unique to him or her, and very relevant and very interesting. That's it. The Ministry of Education is not going to decide upon what kind of knowledge those kids need to know. 40% of it, the parents, the teachers, the superintendents will decide locally. Every school will have to decide of 40% of that knowledge base that they are going to test the kids upon. It's going to be really a revolution in the educational system. If, of course, they will do it correctly, because it's not an easy thing to tell a teacher that from now on, 40% of the knowledge base they are going to deliver, you decide upon. That's a very challenging thing to put on their
Actually,
shoulders.
my next question was who you think should lead or should be the leading people or the leadership in education. And I think that here you, in a way, you already answered, but maybe you want to focus a little bit about it more.
Yes, exactly. The kids are our customers, and they need to be part of the decision-making process. Now, of course, a kid of 6 year old will not have a great ability to decide, but a kid of 15 year old in the high school level can can be very active in deciding about those 40% that he would like to be knowledgeable about. And it can be done. A lot of our kids are much, much more knowledgeable about a lot of other things that teachers are not knowledgeable about. And
Oh,
they can be
great.
part of the decision making. Otherwise, it's already almost the last generation that will accept a central authority that will decide for their kids what to study and what not to study, what kind of mathematic units they need to know, or physics unit they need to know. They will be much more aggressive in the future decision making of their kids' schooling. They are
Yeah.
already, parents already today are much more active and much more aggressive. But those kids that are still in schools today, when they'll be parents 20 years from now, they'll be much more aggressive. And they will not ask only for 30, 40% of autonomy. They will ask for 60 and 70% of autonomy of knowledge. And there we're going to see a much let's say, very interesting market of knowledge and competition between groups and between schools of thought and between nations and there where we are going to see really ideas that are going mind-boggling popping out in different places.
Actually, this brings us almost to the last question that I think we all are, aware of those things that everybody's talking about, the artificial intelligence, all the issues of, okay, be aware, the robots are coming and you are going to be out of the system or things like that. But if we connect what we have been talking up to now and to the last words that you mentioned, and we manage to, let's say, to connect it to the what will be the future world of work, the future world of work, what are the skills that will be required besides knowledge? It is so important. And
A
all
lot
together.
of people, a lot of people are studying this issue, and I believe there is a set of requirements that is going to be needed in future the future labor environment. I'm doing now a very large study exactly about it, specifically in the post-corona era, how it's going to affect from the the pattern of interaction between people in work environment to exactly what kind of careers are going to develop, how it's going to affect. This crisis of corona is going to have a great effect on humanity in the next 10, 30, 20, 30 years, etc., etc. These kind of crises are having very long-term effect. And we're trying to understand that effect. And at the moment, we are trying to understand how the labor market is going to change, what kind of new positions are going to develop, new skills are going to develop. And since we did not finish that study, and I believe that study will be published in about a few months from now. It's a very large study that I was asked to do by the Ministry of Labor here in Israel, and I hope it will be published also in English. But here, any nation need to do that kind of study because its nation, its country has its pros and cons. It's very unique human resources, and we need to do a lot of adjustments in our labor market in order to continue and compete worldwide. So I'm doing it very specifically to the Israeli context, but I believe every country needs to do that kind of study and bring the best of what they can deliver from their human resources in order really to be unique and to compete in the 21st century in global markets. So I don't want to, to go at length into it, but it is clear that it's going to be different, not so different, radically different, but there are going to be some very unique talents, unique patterns of working and of exchanging ideas that needs to be brought into the labor market in order for a lot of companies to be able to continue and deliver the products for the next decade or two.
Oh, I just want to read for you. Thank you for the words. I think they are very, very, very powerful. I just want to write to you one of the comments here in the chat by Senya Kun, or Seya Kun. She says, with the technological advancement, I could already see the bigger and bigger divide between developing and developed countries.
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah. Well, that's the challenge. It is a challenge. Let me give you a perspective. Okay. About 200 years ago, there were about 2% of humanity on the top, and all of us were at the very bottom. Okay. Somebody even termed a very interesting term. He called that epoch Les Miserables. All of us were miserable. Okay, and about 1 or 2% of humanity used to do dances every night. The most important revolution that human societies have done in the 20th century is what we call the middle classes. We have organized humanity in a way that there were about 10% on the top, there were always 20% at the bottom, and about the middle class, those 70%. Okay? Now that was very good for the 20th century because those 70% were the labor market in the industrialized era. In the 21st century, we need more than 10% of thinkers, of innovators, of scientists, okay? 20% is not enough. In the 20th century, those 20% were enough to lead those 70% in the middle class. We need now between 30 to 40% of our human resources to be at the top, to be innovators, to be scientists, to be knowledgeable, to be very active, to come up with new ideas. Otherwise, we won't be able to compete worldwide in a globalized environment. The problem is, how do you produce another 30% to go to the top? So what we're doing is we're doing a lot of strategies now, either consciously or not, and push about 30% from the middle class to go upward to the higher classes. The problem is that in that process, about 10% from the middle class is going down to the lower classes. So what we're going to see in the 21st century is a society that has about between 30 to 40% at the top layers, echelons, if you wish, societal echelons, about 40% in the middle class, and about 30% in the lower classes. Now, this is a challenging phenomena, politically, socially, economically, but this is the 21st century. And it's not going to be only on each country, it's going to be worldwide. What we're going to see is that a lot of nations are going to go up and develop to be part of the developing countries, and some countries are going to go down. And it's a challenge. It's going
yeah, it is.
This is the 21st century. We cannot avoid it. Okay, what we can do is raise the awareness to it, because we don't have any other way to bring those 30% to be part of the higher echelons. And this is the only way to be able to continue developing, to continue be part of the modern world of the 21st century. And I believe that this, let's say, a mix of societal portions are going to bring havoc to some countries. And it's going to change the political landscape of many countries. But it's a challenge. What we need to remember is that those 40% at the top are going to contribute in many ways to humanity. And they are going, even though there will be another 30% at the bottom, their level of existence economically, socially, are going to be much, much better than the level they have now. But compared to the other parts, they will feel that they are mistreated, if you wish.
Yeah, so in a way, if we are really challenged, because we are challenged all over, not only developed countries or developing countries, I think that we are all facing a huge challenge. One is the education, and the other one is what we are today is the Earth Day, as you know, and the climate situation and the changes that we are facing, and the very, very low still conscience about what we are doing to Mother Earth. So in a way, I would like you with all together, and I think we learn from you so much in this short time, just to summarize and to give us a positive and very a positive way to look to the future.
Well, I am very optimistic about the human species. I know that there are not a lot of people that are optimistic. Most of them are pessimistic. I'm optimistic just by looking how we are developing. It doesn't say we're not doing mistakes. We are doing mistakes. Some of them are very grave mistakes. Some of them it will be hard to to manage later on and maybe correct. But generally speaking, we are much smarter. We are much healthier. We are very much educated more than the previous generations. We are much global. We are much aware of each other. We are very much even, not just much, mobile worldwide. We're constantly, moving from one place to other place, and we are learning from each other. So generally speaking, I see my children and my grandchildren. They are doing amazing things that even myself I couldn't even imagine what they will be doing. If I can, be a little bit personal, I have my oldest. She's doing a postdoc at the MSK in Manhattan. It's a it's a it's a hospital that is very much known for treating cancer, but she's developing a technology with which she will be able to diagnose Alzheimer 20 years or 30 years before it even starts, which means that they are doing amazing things with which they are going to push forward human abilities, human minds. And when she explains to me what she's doing, I'm totally shocked, even though I was able to predict that this is what's going to happen. But the way she's doing it, and the ideas they're coming up with, and these are just our children. What about their children? And their children, they will be doing their postdoc in 15 years, 20 years. So it's going to be much, much better than most of us think. Again, I'm not saying that we're not doing mistakes. I'm not saying we don't have some very global challenges that we need to take care of. But I believe that challenges and mistakes are an opportunity to grow and to emerge. Okay? If I can, say just another example, take for example this COVID crisis. It was a human mistake. Just by doing things differently, we could have avoided this pandemic. Now, after we had the pandemic, we take the opportunity, and we have now developed a tool to be able, the mRNA procedure. We have developed a tool with which we will be able to develop a vaccine against cancer. That's an amazing achievement because of that crisis. And for the first time, we have developed a technology that in a matter of 6 weeks only, any virus that will jump up from an animal, we will have a vaccine against it. 6 weeks, not a year. So those challenges and mistakes we're doing are pushing humanity and human species to continue and evolve to higher levels of technologies, of international institutes, etc. I just finished a very large study trying to understand how this crisis is going to change global institutes, from the CDC to the UN, but it's another issue we need to have another opportunity to speak about. It's
Exactly.
exactly what happened after the Spanish flu. Humanity after the Spanish flu has organized itself in a new way. We have developed what we call social networks. We have developed medical services. Those challenges are pushing humanity to continue and evolve. And I was trying to understand how this crisis is going to push forward humanity to evolve. And we are going to evolve. Not all of us, a lot of us. And for the first time, there are going to be on Earth about 10 billion people. Think about 40% of them are going to be so smart, so amazing, and they will have new ideas, and all together they will be able to push forward humanity in ways we can't even imagine at this point. And I'm very optimistic. So how about that
Oh,
optimism?
Professor Pasik, it was incredible. And I really share with you the positivism, the also, sorry, I am positive too, a very positive person. And I think that we should all, keep on doing as educators, as human beings, as you say, especially human beings, to create an activity that actually will be in a way that moment that you know these challenges are going to bring us into a much more peaceful world, much more friendly world, and without too many let's say too many
Conflict.
conflicts in between people. And
Yeah,
yeah, I
well,
wanted to be very very diplomatic, and you helped
yeah, well,
me.
let me. I see
And
a lot of
I
people
just,
are speaking about it in the chat.
yes, I
Yeah.
know. And
Let me add another phrase.
yes, of course.
The last phrase. Last thing.
Yeah, we,
Uh, you know, humanity has been uh, uh, engaged in conflicts from its very beginning.
that's right.
But just remember that nowadays conflicts are less cruel, more moral. Okay, if you kill somebody that you were not supposed to kill in a battlefield, you lose the battle. It was not such a thing during for millennia. For millennia, people used to slaughter each other, to burn everything, and erase races. Nowadays, we are much better. It's not exactly what we would like to see. We are still in conflicts. We are still having a lot of differences. And we are still very primitive in solving our conflicts. But if I may take a larger perspective, a century from now, 500 years from now, humanity is going to be totally different, much, much better. It's like we are much better now than a century ago. Just think about World War I and World War II. In a matter of 4 years in World War I, there were about 38 million people that were slaughtered. In World War II, 72 million people that were slaughtered cruelly. Nowadays, we don't see those kind of things. Humanity is aware. Of course, there are still a lot of troubles worldwide, but it's much better than it used to be. And people can raise their voice in a way that they could not do it, just a few decades ago. And it's going to be better and better and better and better. That's how we evolve. We are still a very primitive species. Just remember that. But we are developing and evolving in a very exponential way. And our offsprings will be much better. It's like we are much better than our forefathers in most of the countries. Okay, by the way, life expectancy now worldwide, even if you take all those, calamities all over the world, has reached 63 years of healthy years. We are not already, we do not count just, life expectancy, how many years we live, but we count. World Health Organization has developed a way to measure how many healthy years people are living worldwide. And the average now is about 63. Just 2, 3 decades ago, being 60-year-old was very old. Now we have about 63, 70 years of healthy years, and it's worldwide. And we are continuing developing, and we're continuing, making our medicine and our medical services much, much better worldwide. Some places better, some places less, but generally speaking, we are evolving in a very fast way, in a very positive way.
That's right. And I really, really agree with you. And I hope that you will agree with me and with us. I hope that the key for it is the education. Education is the key
Of course.
for a better future in
Of course.
every level, in every moment, in every situation. And of course, I am a person that I believe that things are in our hands. We can't stay and wait for others to do it for us. So let's start doing together. And so we will be able to make these transformations and changes that we need. And again, I would like to say again, thank you very much, Professor Pasik, for your time, for your great words. And I think we have a lot of to learn yet in
Well,
our
thank you. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please send me emails. Give them my website. And there
I
are a
will give
lot of
them.
materials over there.
Yeah.
As much as I can help, I'll be very
They will
glad to.
find your details in our Facebook. And again, thank you very much, and thank you for all of you who came and attended this hour and something minutes together with a very, very special person. Thank you, Professor Pasig, and
Thank you so much.
keep on doing. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.